We'll have two loads coming out. This load is at the end, but let's see what happens. And then we may switch the trailers. See what I'm saying? And make sure.
Well, it's 9 o'clock this Monday, March 28th. So we'll call the regular meeting of Mills County Commissioners Court to order. If you would join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and the prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner Williams, would you lead us in prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, be with us this day as we do the business of Mills County. Father, bless everyone that's here today and everyone that lives in Mills County. Father, be with us as we come to you today to ask for rain for Mills County, but all of Texas. Father, thank you for the volunteer fire departments as they've been extremely busy. Father, be with us today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay, present in the courtroom, we have the county judge, commissioners Wright, Guerin, Parton, and Williams. So court is 100% present and a legal quorum. We also have present in the courtroom the county attorney, the county treasurer, and the county clerk. So with that, we will get underway and start with the review and approval or action on the minutes of March 14th. Has the court had the opportunity to review the minutes, and are there any corrections or additions?
I did not notice any corrections. I make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as written. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Next item on the agenda is audience with individuals. Ms. Scott, has anyone signed up to speak?
No, sir.
Okay, there being no one has signed up to speak, we were done with item 3. Moving on to item 4, consider an act on accounts payable. This was distributed electronically from the treasurer's office Friday, as the court had the opportunity to review.
I have one question.
Go ahead.
Page 10. Colorado River Tractor United Daughters, I guess, maybe, Senior Center. I just didn't know what that was.
Reimbursement. I guess
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
a reimbursement.
Okay.
Is what I assume it is, that they've booked it and then decided not to use it, so they're asking for the money back.
Gotcha.
I have one on page 5. Mid-American Research Chemical Corporation, it's being taken care of. It shows $228. The check will actually be $123.27. Talk to Julia, she's taking care of it.
So that'll be canceled and reissued at a different amount.
Yes.
Okay.
What was the amount again?
$123.27. I did have questions on these, but Judy answered that too. The U.S. Bank Voyager fuel rebated deal, but she said that's putting it on the card and getting a rebate. Volunteer fire department, they have one at 3 cents.
And I believe anybody who uses that card gets a rebate on the fuel that they use. The new line will make sure.
Yeah, I had a question on page 7. It was just something I hadn't seen before. it was purchase of 6.5 millimeter Creedmoor ammunition in the sheriff's office. Sheriff, I see you on Zoom. Is this a new weapon or is this one we've had?
This is one that we've had for a couple of years. It's actually assigned to one of the deputies that's been to a long range tactics shooting school. So that's
Okay.
keep up
Thank you. Just
required by TCO.
didn't recognize the caliber and was curious.
We don't shoot a whole lot of it because it's expensive.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions on accounts payable? Is there a motion?
I'll move we approve the accounts payable.
We have a motion from Commissioner Guerin. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Wright. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, we've approved the accounts payable. Number 5, consider an act on the purchase of body cameras. This was discussed and tabled last meeting with some questions over exactly how many we were getting and what line items it was coming from. Who is prepared to speak to this?
Judge, I can speak to that.
Okay. Yeah, I think the questions from last week was just a little confusion about the invoice and how many cameras we're actually purchasing.
There's going to be 7 units on the patrol side and 2 units in the jail for a total of 9. And then that's the units itself, and then you have to have the hardware and everything that goes with it.
And that replaces 9 older units that are going out of support.
It doesn't replace 9. It only replaces, I want to say 7. But we've decided, just because of some of the things that are going on in the jail or society in itself, is to arm the jailers as well with some cameras, just to reduce any liability when handling the inmates in the back. But Watch Guard is something that we've had for many, many years, but then they sold out to a different company. And ever since then, the new design that they've come out with, I know years back, the first batch of the new ones we got, none of them worked. We had to seek counsel to write them a letter. They sent us all new cameras again and then reimbursed our money. And we're down to 2 units now. We're legislatively required, to have body cameras, and we don't have enough units to go around now, and they're all pretty much on their last leg.
Were there other questions on the invoice? This other question that came up that I recall from last meeting was whether or not this was in the budget or how it was going to be paid. Other questions on the invoice from the court?
Yes, on item 8 on that invoice, I think that was a big deal last time. Quantity 168. And what is that? Well, it's $50 for one, but 168 quantity.
Hang on, I'm having to pull it up on my phone as I go.
The description is a CELIC class, if I'm reading it right. Get to Cloud Monthly Plan 3. 60.
Yeah, we're going to a cloud server versus what we have now. Everything we have now stays there, and it just hangs in a hard drive. But eventually, that hard drive is going to be overrun. But this cloud, you can ensure that it'll always be there, and whenever I'm gone, if there's any question ever to come back. So you've got some licensing fees and then monthly fees and stuff like, or not monthly, but quarterly or yearly. I'm trying to find, here it is. Hang on just a minute.
Yeah.
All right. The question, I guess, Commissioner Parton had, which number was it?
It's number 8, and I think the confusion is just over the quantity, which shows 168 of these units at $50 a piece.
Right, and that is not a, let's see. Quantity, okay. There again, that's the licensing and everything, the $8,400. I don't know how to read their quote. I'm not sure on that myself because I don't know why it says 168, but
That's something we need to find out, because that's about half of the cost of the whole deal.
yeah, I mean, it's required to run it. Without that, it's not going to work. And we
How
can go back
long
to
is-
Watchguard, and they're more expensive than this, but we can get a quote from them if you want.
It says monthly plan 3, is that, I mean, is that 168 gonna be a recurring cost for keeping them working, or periodically, or?
Is that,
That should be a one-time fee. $8,400, if that's what you're asking.
it says monthly.
The next line down says video license maintenance per month, but it's only got 48 units.
So the monthly should be $15 a month on the next line.
Yeah.
And I don't know why it says 48. I don't know why it's saying that.
This was the confusion in part from last time. And I guess one other question.
I tell you what, let's I'll move on through the agenda. Let me call them and I'll get back on here.
Okay, hey, before you do, the other question that came up last time was, is this in the budget? Because if it's budgeted, then there's no approval needed to expend budgeted money. It's just paid through the accounts payable process. And so the
But,
question is,
yeah, and I understand that. I just want the court made aware of what the situation is, and that, yeah, if the money's there to spend it, I'm bringing it to y'all to keep you abreast of what's going on, basically.
got it.
So the event when this invoice comes in, you'll already know.
Where does this come out of the budget, Sheriff?
I think we had some money in technology fund.
Yeah, budget was 44,000 and there's an unspent 30,000. So
Correct.
that's where it would be paid.
Correct.
So you were going to get on the phone with the vendor while we do some other stuff and see if you can get an answer?
Sure.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the court? I mean, if this is just acknowledging it.
In a minute, yeah, we can
Sure.
put it in a court, but not, we can table it.
Okay, but it sounds to me like here, if it's in the budget,
Deputy Fincher would like to say something.
this is just information. Go ahead, Deputy.
I got an email from Chief Deputy Green, who's not available right now. It kind of explains a little bit of it, and I'll just read it. It's from this company that's provided the quote for us, the GTAC. It says that quantity 168 reflects 7 body-worn cameras times 24 months of cloud storage and the enterprise software that it has to use to operate. The quantity 24 reflects 2 master docs times the 24 months of licensing and support for the metadata mover software on the dock. So you have to have software that's for the docs in order to retrieve that from the cloud in order for us to, either download that or once we need it to burn it for like the cases and stuff. It says GTAG has to show these items as a monthly cost due to their agreement with Microsoft Azure for government. So that's they have a contract because of the regulations for government usage or whatever, and they have to show it as a monthly cost.
So this is 24 months basically of storage and related software, but for 7 units, and we're getting 9. So is there two more somewhere? I mean, you would store your.
The quote that we have is for 7 units, but I think the sheriff has made the determination that we're going to go ahead and replace all the body worn cameras because of the issue with WatchGuard.
But so this 8,400 would be for a 24 month period
Yes.
for 7 years.
Yes. And 2 docks. The docking station is where the software is installed, and that allows the videos to be uploaded to the cloud server.
That's on line 7.
But in 24 months, you have to renew this,
Yes, it's
or you'll be looking at another 8,400 or more.
Yeah, it's.
I'm not sure of the answer to that question, if it's gonna be that, or if it's just gonna be a maintenance fee at that point. I don't.
It's going to be something they'll have to budget annually.
Technology.
Well, I would move we acknowledge the presentation on the body camera purchase, and it's within the sheriff's budget.
Is that a motion?
That's, yeah, I move
I
we
second.
acknowledge. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fincher. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion of Three Oaks and other fire. In your package, there's a map from the Forest Service of the Three Oaks fire area. It was determined by the Forest Service to be just over 3,500 acres. Various times during the fire, it was reported at 6,000 or more acres. But in any event, it was quite a fire. But I wanted everybody to see the footprint of it. The reason I put it on here for discussion is I think the fire, first of all, it involved all of the volunteer fire departments in the county and a large number of out-of-county units. Just like we're facing in the precincts and in law enforcement, our fuel costs are up. And so I expect the volunteer fire departments will be strained on fuel as we go through the rest of the year on their budgets. And there was some news this morning about a fire in Coryell County started on the north side of Fort Hood. It was uncontained, at least when the news was written. And they've evacuated the town of Flat on Highway 36. So it was already larger than this one. So there is continuing fire danger in our immediate area. I'm glad we have the burn ban. I'm glad we have dedicated volunteers, and I just wanted to bring this before the court in case there was any other discussion to be had. The Bubonic swift current wind was in Friday. Their contractors were, I think, everybody's in agreement. They started this one with welding or cutting. They've been dealing with the landowners. They tell me to try and make people good. They have also said they will be making donations to the fire departments, which may help with the fuel. And I know we had some county equipment involved in this one, and so we may want to ask for something there. I believe they would be receptive. That's what I wanted to say on this. Is there any others? Go ahead.
They were real prompt in their response. was that evening of the fire, Scott Creek called me and wanted to know what they need to do. And I told them probably gonna need some hay, for the people who were burned out. And the next morning they had 3 semi-loads of hay. I don't know where he got it overnight or what they charged him for it, but there were 3 loads they were unloading the next morning. So, to me, that was a real plus on their side, because I don't know where you find 3 semi-loads of hay overnight.
Commissioners, anything y'all would like to add about fires?
Well, they had a pretty substantial fire backside of Blanket yesterday, Saturday, I guess, Mills County.
Is that one that happened last week?
Well, somebody said that, and I thought, well, that's a long time in between. But they did say they evacuated Sydney and everybody living between Sydney and Comanche. But it was smoky.
Last I saw, that one at Flats burned off 17,000 acres so far.
Really?
And they were going to evacuate the town of Flat last night and got it turned, and they let them go back home. But there's one there, and there's one at outside of Crawford and one outside of Iredale this morning. It's uncontrolled. 3 of them.
Well, they are predicting some rain on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And that rain did help put those others out, especially the Eastland Complex fire. It helped get it, they didn't put it out, helped get it under control. So any moisture we're appreciative of.
Well, I guess all we can say is just ask everybody to be careful, whether it's in working on equipment or the citizens, anything you're doing outside, even if it's legal, it's probably not smart in these conditions. Okay, anything further on fire? Based on the discussion last week, I've put together quite a bit of information on dispatching, and Jackie, if you would shift to a full screen presentation or a shared screen presentation. I'm gonna throw it up here on the wall. As I recall, the court last time asked me to make sure we had a response to Hamilton Hospital District and explore start exploring the cost options. So here we go. Basically, flip a page. We got several options here. Jackie, if you'd turn the page. Identify 3 options. One is the status quo, which is may not be an option, but it's theoretically an option. It's a shared jailer dispatcher function. Number 2 is a separate county emergency communications department, and that's what most of this will be about. And that's being done in a number of counties. And the third one is, I call it outsourcing, but it's probably better described as combining with another county's emergency communication department to have a regional emergency communication department. Going to the next page, Jackie. The shared function, which is the status quo and is the most economical, is not a good option because it requires cooperation from the sheriff who has a deadline out there for us. And included in that is ultimatum that it will not dispatch for Hamilton Healthcare, and is subject to obviously any future unilateral decisions. So go into the next option, which is the next page, Jackie. It's a separate county emergency communications department. This would take staffing to provide 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, every day of the year coverage, at least 4 full-time employees plus a supervisor. That will cost us just under $300,000. This may require relocation of people and equipment, and where we relocate to first of all, there are multiple options, but where we move drives the upfront one-time cost substantially. It depends on location. So let's talk about some of the potential locations I identified, and there could be more. The first one, and I just started with the easy one, is the existing law enforcement center 911 dispatching site. This one would use the existing PSAP, and that's the 911 consoles in the control room and adjacent office. It could be either a permanent or an interim solution while we move to another approach. And it's got several advantages. It's got the least amount of cost to implement and the least amount of technology to relocate. It takes advantage of the existing security, radio hookups, and servers in the law enforcement center. And it uses facilities that were constructed as contemplated by our taxpayers in a bond election. It's got some disadvantages. The disadvantage is it would need to separate from the jailer functions from the dispatching functions to comply with jail standards. And it could be with different functions sharing a duty. You have the possibility for a hostile work environment. The second option is related to that. If you'd flip the page, 2 pages, Jackie. Okay, that's option 1. Let's go on to option 2. Okay, this is the second law enforcement center option, and that's to move the PSAP and dispatching to office space in the law enforcement center. The advantages of this is it keeps the operation in a modern, secure facility with existing server rooms and trunk cabling. It uses the bond-funded building for the purposes anticipated by the taxpayer, that is dispatching, and it reduces the potential for a hostile work environment interaction. The disadvantages of this one is it would have remodeling costs to reconfigure some of the office space into a dispatch center. It would force cabling runs from the existing dispatch area to the new area, but the runs would be in the same building. And it would move the sheriff or chief deputy to another county-owned office space, which could be in the law enforcement center or the courthouse. So let's look at another option. You flip the slide, there we go. This moves dispatching to the county courthouse. The potential spots, there are 2 vacant spaces in the lower level of the courthouse. The advantages of this is it separates dispatching and the 911 answering point physically from the sheriff's department and the law enforcement center, and the space is currently available and generally unused. The disadvantages are that the courthouse is a historic building. We don't have a server room, and there's not good wiring infrastructure. This means that the upfront cost of setting this up could be very high. And another problem is that the restrooms in the courthouse are remote from the basement. So when you're running a 24/7 coverage with one person on duty, this is a complication. And the final disadvantage is the building security for the courthouse is considerably less and less modern than the law enforcement center. And the final one, let's flip the page, Jackie, is new construction. And this would be the easiest solution would be to design a potential replacement EMS station with additional space to provide 911 dispatching and emergency communication. Advantages, it's new construction, so it can accommodate the server rooms, security, necessary bathroom arrangements without any tear down and reconfiguration. It's adjacent to the existing law enforcement center, which reduces the distance for antenna leads and other cabling to run. And the incremental cost of doing this may be covered in the American Rescue Act grant. So it would protect our taxpayers there. The disadvantages is this could take a year to become a fully built and operational. As with any construction project, you have exposure to delay and cost overruns. And finally, to the extent we can fit it in the grant, it absorbs grant money that could be used for other purposes. So those are the options I've identified, and we can discuss them, but let's talk about cost. Now, this is operating costs. This isn't cost of the options, because there's no point in costing out all the options till we figure out which way we want to go. The operating cost is primarily staffing. And the staffing cost would be 4 people and a supervisor at the existing dispatcher jailer hourly rates and our existing county benefits. That's $396,000 a year rounded. To give you a point of reference, Hamilton County is building an emergency, or has built an emergency communication center, and their staff is based on 8 plus a supervisor. So that's 2 people on each shift plus a supervisor. Ours is based on 1. Call volume, and this is just pulled from the monthly reports we get from the sheriff's office, looks like it runs on average around 300 per month total calls. That's, and it doesn't work this way in real life, but just doing the math, that's 10 calls every 24 hours, or about 1 call every 2 hours. Now, that can leave a lot of unproductive time for an employee, but also the calls are not going to space out evenly like that. They're going to happen when they happen. And from talking to other dispatch departments, there are peak times. And regardless of how the calls happen, the dispatcher must be continuously available. They can't close for lunch. There has to be somebody to answer the phone. That's why the combined function with other jobs like a jailer is efficient, and separating these functions like we're looking at is going to be a potential additional cost for the county. Now, it's not just anybody can be a dispatcher. These are licensed telecommunicators, and that's a requirement. And I just wanted the court to see, if you'd flip the page, Jackie, the requirements to be a telecommunicator. You've got to be a U.S. citizen. You've got to be 18. You've got to be a high school graduate. You have to pass both physical and psychological examinations. There can be no felony or misdemeanor A convictions, that's ever, and no misdemeanor B convictions in the last 10 years. And if you've ever been dishonorably discharged, that's a disqualifier. Let's go on to the next page. The licensing, to get to the license, there's a 40-hour basic telecommunicator training. There is required review of the TCOL, Texas Commission on Law Enforcement Rule Review, and there's a 24-hour crisis communications class. All of these 3, I'm told, can be done in about 2 weeks. And there's higher level training available and higher level licensing. So let's flip the page. So potential savings. Let's go on to the next one. The obvious one is continue the status quo. If we do what we have been doing, there's no additional cost, but that's not an option we can control. So the next one, one cost saving is to establish an emergency communications center. Having more call volume becomes more efficient. You can spread that supervisor over more operators and may need potentially not the same number of operators. There's upfront and overhead cost of a regional center are only going to be borne once. Hamilton County is in process of this right now, and has promised a budget what their costs look like. I do not have that yet. And San Saba County is willing, but it's not as far along, and has not moved toward a regional center. And then the final cost option is obviously whatever, we're talking about cost here. It's line item budget adjustments or reductions from law enforcement and jail. So I don't know that that would ever balance it entirely, but those are the options. Now, what do we do? The next steps I've identified are to select the initial location and then determine if that's the final location or if we need an interim step to get to the final location. And the best example of that is if we're doing something that involves construction, that takes time. And so we're going to have an interim step to get that done. We need to hire a supervisor as we start putting this together, and who would then be charged with building budgets and hiring staff, and the staff have to get trained. We need, obviously, I've talked about budgets, we'd need to obtain bids. There are agreements to be negotiated with the COG, who provides the PSAP services, and other parties, especially if we're going with interlocal agreements. And then nothing ever stays the same. We'd have to periodically revisit this and continue the discussion in Commissioner's Court. So that's what I've done since last meeting. I think the thing to do at this point is to discuss which location options, which location to go forward with, so we can harden up numbers and get the go ahead to keep moving on this project. We can move away from, let's leave the split screen up in case anybody wants to refer back to any of those slides. Comments from the court?
You talked about Hamilton County and Cincinnati County. You checked with Brown County, what they're doing in their process.
No, I did not.
I wonder how they're dispatching and what they do.
I'll find out.
Okay.
Where's Hamilton planning on putting their dispatch center?
It's already under construction. It's in what they call the Courthouse Annex, which is that old bank building on the northwest side of the square.
I was wondering if they weren't going to use it.
Yeah.
Since they've already had it.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be open and going when?
Right now, their target is May. A month ago, it was April, so it's slipping. They're building a radio tower. When I was up there, and it's been several weeks, the server room build out was in process. They have a supervisor hired, they have staff hired, and they are doing interim operations from the old site in the sheriff's department, in the law enforcement center.
Have they hinted to you about cost, from the cost?
Their first number was it would have to add a person and be responsible for whatever technology costs there are to link their dispatch center with our radio network. So I don't think that's the right answer, but let's assume it is. That means 4 people versus our model of 4 plus a supervisor. So we're at least saving the supervisor.
What was their dispatch center was in their law enforcement center?
Yes.
What happened over there?
It's secondhand, and there may be other people with other views on it, but what was reported to me was it was difficult to keep staffed.
But their jail is closed, so their deal was just dispatchers. It wasn't
Yes.
dispatcher/jail.
I don't know that their jail may be operating as a holding facility. I believe they do magistrate people before they ship them.
Well, the quickest route would be to join with Hamilton Dispatch, correct? I mean, whatever other option that you put in there, it's going to take some time.
Well, I mean, the quickest route would be to put dispatch staff in the existing dispatch room at the law enforcement center.
Okay.
And share it with the jail staff. then your delay becomes one of hiring and staffing. There's not meaningful technology. There may be some technology to move.
So what does jail standards say about that when sharing the same space?
My visit with jail standards was sharing the space was okay. They just couldn't perform jailer functions. They couldn't control inner doors in the jail. They couldn't be responding to call buttons from prisoners. They couldn't be doing the jailer function of the job.
So we'd still have to have a supervisor for that and the 4.
Yes.
Well, that would be probably the most economical route.
Well, you don't know. You don't know what Hamilton's gonna
Yeah,
charge us.
I don't know how many, with Hamilton route, you wouldn't necessarily have the supervisor. You would have some technology. The
Right.
technology cost should be one time. A human being is every year. And one thing I want to point out is our total head count, Ms. Campbell, is 49. When you hit 50, I believe is the magic number, you're subject to FMLI. So I don't know the cost impact of that, but we are required to offer those benefits countywide as we add staff. Now, if we're really within one person, we're going to get there sooner or later anyway.
I know the dispatch center, as we have it now, overlooks the holding facilities, I guess you'd say.
Yes.
Other than if we move dispatch to another office area in the existing facility, that big cost of moving wires and stuff, but other than that, the equipment can be moved, right?
That's correct. And with regard to the 911 equipment, the COG will move that at their cost. But there's 2 pieces to this, to dispatching. There's answering the 911 call, and then there's getting on the radio and dispatching the appropriate response. The cost of moving that piece of the communication will be on the county. The COG will just move the incoming phone side of it.
And we don't know who would move that.
Well, I've got a list of contractors that have been used or being used in other counties to move things like that, but I haven't gone to them to start talking about cost because I don't want to be getting people to work on some direction we're not prepared to go.
And that's dispatching what? 911, EMS, fire?
911 would be any emergency call. So it could be law enforcement, fire, or EMS.
And Hamilton agreeable to maybe let us play with them on the deal.
Yes. And the COG sees a trend. I mean, it's reasonable in small counties to pull together on this stuff because of you've got to run it 24/7. It's technology. It's what you lose is local knowledge, but as a practical matter with people moving in and out and things changing, it's how much local knowledge does any one person have anymore? I mean,
Well, with the new technology, that's
yeah.
the local knowledge is not as great as it used to be.
Well, it will be for our older citizens, and I'd put myself, the maps will show what the maps show, but if the caller says, I'm next door to the Guerin place, or I'm down from the old Linderman place or something, somebody might know where that is. But the maps won't.
So if we go with Hamilton, we don't have to look out for hiring. Correct?
Correct. It would keep the head count off our books.
Right.
It would still have whatever expense went with it, but we wouldn't have the bodies.
If we sign with Hamilton that'd be an interlocal agreement, correct?
Correct.
And that would, and.
Or
can we do it-
San Saba or Brown
Yeah,
County. or
can you do
wherever
it
we go.
monthly or can you do it? So are they gonna want a 6 month or a year or what?
I would anticipate we'd want to have at least an intermediate term agreement. This is too important and too complicated to go shifting it around month by month. I mean, so it probably should be multi-year with some cancellation provisions with long notices, absent a default.
Do we want to have control of it or do we want, you see what I'm saying? If we give it to Hamilton, they'll be in control over the dispatch. Or we'll be doing this.
What happens if we have a disagreement with Hamilton?
Well, that's what, that's.
Yeah, I mean,
where was going with that.
What I envision would be you would have the right to pull out with notice. So you couldn't fix it immediately. If you couldn't jawbone it with them, you'd have to give notice and make some other arrangements. But you would need that notice period to do something else. I mean, like we're seeing here, you don't just flip the switch. It takes planning. Now, it's possible that everybody has their own dispatch protocols and we put together a notebook saying this is the way we want our stuff handled. But I don't have that. It may be that it may exist. And whether or not Hamilton or whoever we deal with would be willing to have their dispatchers have multiple protocols, I don't know.
If we go the route of hiring new employees, that FMLA could be a HR headache in your office.
Not in my office.
I'm looking at some.
It potentially could be the biggest part is when you have somebody do a on FMLA, you have to have somebody stand in their place, and then you're working people overtime and you have that cost, and then you have employee burnout and on and on and on. I don't think I have any issue regulating FMLA.
Yeah.
I'm about to go to conferences to address that, so. That's not the issue, it's still the running over the budget. At this point.
Mr. Hale, do you have any guidance for us?
No, other than just stating the obvious, I guess, the county really has an obligation to people to support a reliable 911 accurate service and related dispatching. And I think you're going about it the correct way. Look at the different options, and you're just going to have to pick one and bite the bullet and do it. And we have time restraints that need to be recognized too. So
Yes.
that's the only comment that I would have. I might also, you said something about interlocal agreements. Most of them, I guess, really, every interlocal agreement I've ever seen has provisions in it for termination by either side. That's just the nature of government. In my opinion, that a different commissioner court, either in this county or in this county, might have different opinions. And I think if it did enter into an interlocal county, it would have some termination provisions on reasonable notice.
Well, I think then the guidance I'm looking for from the court is it sounds like the two best approaches are going in with another county or doing something ourselves in the law enforcement center. Is that what we don't need to vote on it because I don't have the numbers to ask you to vote on, but Am I reading this correctly, Commissioner Wright? I'm gonna just start with you.
Yes, way I look at it is I like to see Mills County independent. With
Okay,
their own system.
okay,
You know, I just don't want to be back in the situation in 2 years from now.
Yeah.
And if that's looking at putting it in a law enforcement center, or if it's looking at building a new building, or if it's looking at putting it in the courthouse, that's something this court will decide. But I'd like to see us independent, the county owner. All together.
okay. The quickest,
Money's gonna be expensive either way we go.
the cheapest would be to leave it where it is. The next cheapest immediately to the taxpayer would be to do it as an adjunct to the grant-funded ambulance station.
But that's a year.
And so would need the interim step of keeping it somewhere. And you don't want to move it twice because that's two costs.
I'll agree with you.
So,
I don't really particularly care about thinking about putting it in the courthouse, especially in the basement, because we
Yeah.
have problems flooding.
I agree with that. I don't-
So,
Well, we don't have a backup either.
no,
well, we don't have anything,
Yeah, I mean, it'd be,
we got an elevator.
so we're gonna work on it.
Okay,
But yes, I'd rather see law enforcement or a new facility.
okay. Commissioner Gearing? What are your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you on the law enforcement. I also think we need to really seriously consider trying to make a deal with Hamilton to do it. And there are several pluses. They're one of them. The way I understand it, their dispatchers are getting like where they can give medical advice over the radio.
That's true.
Since you having a baby or God bless, whatever, you know, that they can at least advise people and help people. And to me, that's a very big plus, you know, if they had that, 'cause, you know. And cost wise, I think we need to watch cost really as much as anything, but I really think cost wise and service wise, we'll be better off tying it in with Hamilton County.
With regard to providing the medical advice, that's just extra training and licensing. Our people could be doing that now if we paid for the training and the time to do it, or anything we do. It's just, that's a goal they set day one and they're doing it. Commissioner Parkin, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we already, as stated before, we already have the facility in place. We can either move it to a different office, leave it where it's at. The cost, to me, the cost analysis between the county doing it or Hamilton doing it should be considered, because you're actually gonna be with the same group of people. So if Hamilton can do the dispatching at a relatively whatever cost compared to having four employees and a supervisor and setting your own deal up. But I think it's just I mean, everybody wants the best medical attention that they can get. We are rural, but costs still have to be factored in, either having it in county or out of county. So I'd say look at the cost options between the two. But I would, if we're gonna do it, I'd do definitely, because we've already spent or are spending $7.25 million on the facility out there. So the facility needs to be utilized at its maximum.
Okay. Commissioner Williams?
I kind of agree with Gail on this. I mean, I think we're gonna have to do an interim with Hamilton for a time being before we get anything done. The in-house, I agree with Mike. I'd like to keep it in-house and long-term. But Dale, it's not 7 million, it's 9 million. It's what the audit said the other day. With all the,
$7.25 million.
Yeah, it's been paid down over the years.
it's gonna end up costing 9, but yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it put in, all the options are great options. I don't have necessarily, if we build a facility, I'm scared that that's gonna take longer than a year to get something built. So that lets you back at Hamilton as an interim or San Saba or whoever. The other thing that bothers me, if we go in-house, are we gonna find the dispatchers? Are we gonna find a supervisor?
Yes.
I mean, looks like every business in town is looking for employees.
To me, that's gonna be the major problem, the staffing that, you know, because there's no employees, you know, the employee pool,
And
like
then
you said, very small.
we're gonna have to have a pretty well trained supervisor to know what's going on, because none of us can be the supervisor.
And that supervisor, I mean, people quit, die, get sick. I mean, and you can't have a break in your phone being answered. So the supervisor is the substitute teacher, so to speak, that has to step in and do it.
Even the cost of those supervisors.
Well, that's where it's kind of leading toward that, Mike. Yeah, that cost of that, the supervisor is gonna be,
Or the hands or the dispatchers. I mean, we hadn't considered that yet. So,
Well,
that's a big thing.
That's one, if we went to Hamilton or whoever, it would be one headache we wouldn't have.
For the time being,
No, I mean, they would have to just take care of staffing.
for the time being,
Yeah, I mean, sheriff advertises all the time for dispatch. I don't think he's overloaded yet.
that's correct.
So that's another thing I think we need to seriously consider is where's the help going to come from? Summer doesn't want to part-time job.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this?
so we really haven't told you which direction.
Well, I mean, you have, I've heard we need an interim solution. I've heard we either need to utilize the facility that we've already paid for, the law enforcement center, or we need to get the best possible value out of another county. So at least that's more than I had coming in here. If there is a consensus that's more focused than that, somebody tell me. And I'm more than willing for volunteers to help with this. Okay, well, this will be on the next and every subsequent agenda with an update as it moves forward.
Permanent.
Yeah. Sheriff, is there anything you would like to add?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, now we can.
There again, I just want to reiterate the fact that we're not refusing to answer the 911. The only thing we have said, and it was presented in the email, I think all of you got, is that there is a phone number at the EMS office. We would push the button like what you're discussing to send it to another facility. We were going to send it direct to Hamilton. Grady is the one that said they are not going to do that. And that's the last time we've discussed it, basically. It's never been an issue of answering 911.
Correct. The issue has been your staff dispatching. And yes, Hamilton has said they do not have a dispatch center and are not staffed to do it and do not intend to. So our challenge is to find dispatching, and we're just taking the approach of doing the whole ball of wax. Okay, moving on. Commissioners' requests and reports. Commissioner Wright.
We've been cutting brush on County Road 315, 423, 424, 429. And we had to patch some blowouts on County Road 429 where it's powdered out. And also I visited with Carlos with TxDOT about material he's getting us a package together and let us know something kind of what we received this year. That's all I know.
Commissioner Guerin.
Well, mainly waiting on a rain before we can grade some roads. And FYI, the rock crusher lasted about from here to the district judge's office and it quit again. Never touched, never ground. We're just getting in position, pulled the ditch with rocks in it, pulled it, got it lined up. And
Same thing from the PTO, or is it?
no more move.
We had a control on that boat on the back of it, did I don't know if y'all were
We
just-
beat on that thing, we'd shuffled this, we'd done this. It had a sensor out, they replaced the sensor and it acted fine. You know, drove it around, kind of road tested it, made sure it was okay. Got the dirt, got the rocks all pulled out of the ditch, got lined up, flipped switch, it's just there. We drug it out of the road, you couldn't even make it move, so.
Yeah, we had something wrong.
Kirby come and looked at it. He thinks there may be something else wrong. So we hadn't ground a rock with it.
But Kirby's looking at it.
Sir,
He's looking at it.
yeah, he came down the other day and
That's pushing on a year in June.
did what?
It's,
That's pushing a year in June. It's
Yeah.
down.
should we sell it?
We hadn't ground a rock with it yet.
Well, it's really not the rock grinder, it's just the
it's the
unit,
tractor.
the tractor.
It's a tractor, it's not the grinder. Grinder's fine, as far as I know. We ain't got to use it, but anyway, I think the grinder.
Well, I had it set up where it rotate monthly or talk to y'all. I've been here a year and 3 months and we've used it 1 month.
We either need some other form of power for that crazy thing, you know, or a different tractor or maybe a front end loader, you know, like a Cat 938 or something like that, you know, mount it where the bucket is, and that way you got stability, and I think it'd be safer. Because those those tires on that thing are not designed to hold that much weight.
Not on that tractor.
So,
Not on that tractor.
not on that tractor. Have you ever blown a tire on that thing? You can hit the ground faster, by God, you think you can. I mean, it's like that.
Well, that's a problem with some of the operators, even on the rock crushing part of it. It's some of them a little bit more patient than
Right.
others, and some, it's the same way driving down the road.
Yeah,
Some of them will run it in road good and they shouldn't.
no, you gotta be patient.
You
with
gotta
that
be
thing.
patient.
But it's just, I mean, it's not working. I mean, like Dale's, or
I think we ought to just all look into. Have you talked to Kirby about replacing the tractor?
no,
Well, I think this is in Road and Bridge. This is a shared asset.
yes, sir, yes, sir. It's-
We have equipment budget there. If y'all could find a solution, let's look at doing it. Or sell this thing.
Yeah, they can't fix it.
Yeah, but I'm not clear from listening to it whether the problem is the tractor or the
Tractor.
crusher.
It's a
Tractor.
tractor.
It's a
Okay.
tractor. It's a
Okay.
tractor. And the downside of that tractor, there's 2 places in Texas you can get parts.
Well, it
I
doesn't,
think, ain't Jason, that's all you found?
Yeah.
One in College Station, I think maybe one in Amarillo.
How old is the tractor?
I don't know.
Old, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's pretty old.
was it new when we bought it?
It's not that
It's
old.
20 years old, I think.
I don't remember.
Well, there's-
I can't tell you.
There's only $1,100 left in that account, so whatever. In the
Okay.
repair part of it, so.
Yeah, let's, okay, Commissioner Parkman.
We're still trying to blade a few roads. Got several 10 horns put in. Do just about have our new truck and new belly dump ready to roll. Looking forward to that. Have elected, quit trying to brush whack or grind on the side of the roads. We could hit something and start our own fire. So we just kind of parked it, but trying to do what we can get done, and we need moisture.
Commissioner Williams.
After court the other day, we picked up a new belly dump, went to Abilene and got that. Having to do a couple extra things to make it connect with both trucks. We're having to redo some wiring and stuff. We got that done. We had to order a Tart motor, so we're waiting on it to get in. With a little bit of rain, we got 532, 540, 538, 536 bladed. That's around the Ebony community. We ended up quitting because last Thursday we started throwing out a few sparks while we were blading, so we quit that. Put in an entryway for a new landowner out there today. Attended several meetings. Hill Country Community Action is kind of interesting. Their CEO, it's been there for many, many years. She's actually worked for Hamilton. Hill Country Community Action, I said Hamilton, 41 years. So trying to get her replaced, we, in a long meeting, we hired an interim CEO for the time being. We had a stack over 2 inches thick of applications that we're trying to weed through. So it's going to take a little bit. Attended last Thursday in Belton, the Child Welfare Board regional meeting, which goes all the way from San Antonio all the way up to us, all the way over to East Texas way. So very informative meetings, first time we've ever been. We also, after court, removed trees on the courthouse lawn. We took down the pine tree and the old mesquite tree and used a stump grinder and grind up all the stumps that were left on the courthouse lawn. So we helped Guy do that with his, he had some trustees helping him. So we got that done last week. Only the other question I had for, maybe this is more of a Gerald question. We have some leftover. It's been declared as surplus sheet metal roof off of the old Barnes and McCullough building that's still at my county yard. The MCAT office has got a new truck and they want to put a carport up. Can we let them have a couple pieces of sheet metal to put up a carport, or?
The president?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you can make a transfer.
I didn't know how, I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
since it's another governmental entity.
Yeah, I think it takes action on the court.
On the court.
Yeah, I think that would be authorized.
I was just trying to get that as an option. Because they got a bid to put up a carport and it was $6,000 or something like that. And so, and that was one of those prefab bought ones too. So I thought it was a little hot. Yeah. So anyway, but we have some left. We have a lot of sheet metal left over sitting out there it's starting to rust, but it worked for that. And I'll look at that. And that's it. That's all I have, Judge.
Okay. Just a lot of quick things. First of all, Friday was the bid deadline on the advertised bid for road materials. And I best I can tell, we've had no response. So that was no bid. Council of Governments met last Thursday. A couple of things I got leaned on by the Workforce Commission. We need to appoint a new representative to the Workforce Commission board. Our last representative was Nancy Knight. The requirement, and she is no longer, after she sold Peabody, she's out of that. The requirement is they have to be able to represent a business. So they have to be an owner or employee of a business that has employees. And they have to attend meetings in Killeen on average once a month. Our April meeting, I think it's going to be April 11th or 12th. I'll send it around. Will include a public hearing on the subdivision ordinance. Remember, when we did that taking assessment, we had to publish a notice, 30 days notice in the paper of a hearing and then an adoption. We can adopt after the hearing. So that subdivision ordinance is finally getting ready to be actionable, and probably not a moment too soon. Finally, tomorrow, and hope maybe even the next day, we've got a county court jury trial going on here. So Jackie and I will not be in the office much of the day tomorrow, and maybe a little bit on Wednesday morning. So if you need me and don't reach me, that's what's going on. And that's all I've got. Yes.
On that, not getting any bids on the crushed material, from what I've seen here lately, that's statewide. Guys, it's got bids, for crushed material. The companies are not honoring them.
I've heard that on fuel bids right now. Nobody's bidding.
They said the rock for the same
Well,
way.
What do we do in that situation? Just go out and, like we always have, buy it?
I don't know, that's crazy.
I was looking at the county attorney.
Yeah, me too.
What was that? I'm sorry.
You can't, we put out bids for some crushed material that were put on county roads. We didn't get any response. And from what I've seen on the internet, a lot of counties are having the same situation. Those guys are not pre-bidding any material because the cost of fuel and everything else is going up so high. If they bid it today, they lost money on it next week. So they just heck with it. And there's some that they've already.
Yeah.
I know several of them contacted Jackie's office, but nobody ever, and picked up a bid, but nobody ever turned one in.
But statutory requirement, that you gotta put it out for bid.
And that's what the auditor said. He says, if you don't get any, that's fine. You've done your due diligence by putting the bid in the paper. And that's where we almost missed the mark last year, but as long as we've got it in the paper, then we're covered. It doesn't matter if we receive bids or not.
Then as individual commissioners, we negotiate on
How do you want to document the absence of a bid? Do you want us to, yeah, we've got the advertisement required them to be submitted by 5 o'clock last Friday to my office.
I would just ask Jackie to make a note in the files. and
Okay.
no bids received at the end of the time.
Do like interest.
Okay.
It's also noted in your minutes for Commissioner's Court that you bids were received.
Okay. Thank
you. Might satisfy your auditor.
I would just write diesel and write big letters at the top.
Okay.
Well, and before we dismiss, Judge, that Mike brought it up before court. He just bought fuel and he about died. He got rolled under the tractor himself, and it's gonna be a problem in the next couple of weeks for sure. We'll start running out of it.
Right. We mentioned this last time, but as we close out March, we're 6 months through the year. The treasurer and I have talked about getting back in front of the court. Maybe we can do it by next meeting. Looking at the major items where we've got problems in our budget mid-year and projected forward. I think it's going to be fuel. It might be overtime in a few departments. Are there other things you're seeing, Ms. Campbell? Material.
That's off the top of my head.
And come back in here and with numbers to talk about what the second part of the year looks like and what we might need to do on line item adjustments to cover. And we may have similar fuel and overtime issues in law enforcement because they burn a lot of fuel.
Yeah, fuel's gonna be a major problem all year. Probably for 2 more years.
I make the motion that we adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we.